Note, the following is not a news show. Repeat, the following is not a news show. This is a platform. Hello everyone, let's talk. So, we'll be undergoing some changes on this channel. I'm taking it in a very different direction. This is a socio-political platform that is also largely educational. So listen up. Today I'm coming at you covering information and thoughts on the Taliban versus the United States. As we go through this period of the Afghan pullout, I want to say that I've been a major advocate for pulling out of the forever wars and adopting a doctrine of peace. But this pullout was so horribly and badly mishandled that that position may become discredited and may become very, very, very suppressed by the dominant narrative. That it may even become vilified in the weeks and even the months and even the years to come. Now, there are some serious differences between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. People like to compare the two together. But you have to understand that these groups come from two very, very different interpretations of Islam. The Taliban interpret Islam in a very conservative manner. They believe in creating an Afghan caliphate that is sort of more or less a Islamic fundamentalist nation. Keep in mind, this would actually be better than the U.S. occupation. Repeat, better. I am in no way apologizing for Islam or advocating for Islam. By any means. I actually consider myself to be something of an accuser or an enemy to the Abrahamic religions of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But I'm also fair. I'm very fair. I'm not petty. Al-Qaeda is more of a political movement than an a truly Islamic movement. Islam is part of what they wanted, but ultimately Al-Qaeda's big thing was they were against the Sauds of Saudi Arabia. They were more of like a sort of a rebellious insurgency against a specific regime, versus the Taliban, who are not against a regime, but rather want to be a regime. So it's quite a bit different. People have a hard time telling the difference between the two. And I get it. Actions speak louder than words, and we should judge people more by their actions than by their words or their intent. That much is true. But who the actions are against matters a lot. Now keep in mind that the Taliban's interpretation of Islam is one of many possible. If you actually look at Islamic scriptures, and I admit I have not read them extensively, but what I am familiar with is that it borrows a lot from other religions, from neighboring cultures, quite a bit actually. There is some undeniable cultural syncretism, such as Muhammad riding up to heaven on the back of a winged horse, the description of which is clearly a Pegasus. It is a clear reference to a Pegasus. Or how the angels in Islamic lore born out of different elements, humans from water. Well, I mean, humans aren't angels in their lore, they're not, but they're born from an element. The jinn born from fire, some born from earth, humans born from water. Like, that sounds like a pretty Greco-Roman sort of deal. Sort of Captain Planet by all your powers combined kind of crap. But otherwise, it is a sister religion to Christianity and Judaism, in spite of many of its differences. And like those two other religions, Islam has many possible interpretations. It doesn't have to be men must all have beards, women must all wear burqas, etc., etc. It depends on how liberally or how conservatively you interpret it. So do not use the Taliban as an excuse to vilify Islam unnecessarily. And remember to give them credit where credit is due. No one is so evil to be without value, and no one is so good to be without fault. Now, there's this friend of mine, guy's named Vin. I don't know his last name. And sometimes he pisses me off a little bit. But then again, who doesn't? Seriously, though. This gentleman named Vin, right, he told me quite a bit about the Taliban, because I do not have access to the Taliban to ask them anything. But he has met with members of the Taliban. So, you know, it's the next best thing to get it from the horse's mouth, to instead maybe get it from the horse's ass. Okay, seriously, that's the last joke at Vin's expense. But seriously, more or less what I was informed is that in many ways people in Afghanistan said their life under the Taliban was largely better. This has been reflected somewhat in my research. Under the Taliban, yes, certain horrible things did occur. People were executed for things that should not be considered crimes. There is strict Islamic Sharia. But all in all, there were some things that were banned by the Taliban that should have been banned. And I will get to that in a minute. But suffice to say, the Taliban cannot kill at the drop of the hat the way we can. A Taliban leader cannot press a button and send a drone strike to kill thousands of innocents like we can. We can kill thousands of people, hundreds, at the push of a button. We are way more powerful and way more frightening than the Taliban. We are the only nation in the history of the world to drop an atomic bomb, ever. 2 atomic bombs, in fact. An absolute horror to have lived through. The differences between military capabilities, the Taliban represents maybe 1/3 of what we're able to do. Yes, I know they have our guns, they have our Black Hawks, but that's cute compared to what we still have left. Don't get distracted by that. So what? So women are allowed to walk around in all covered head to toe in face coverings. Which would you prefer? Walk around covered in face coverings all the time? Or wind up dead in a U.S. drone strike? Or have family members dead wound up in a U.S. drone strike? Which is it worse to live under, I wonder? Especially when we consider the fact that the U.S. failed to, their narrative of nation building. What little they created in Afghanistan was worth less than the dirt at the bottom of my shoe. You saw the videos, I'm sure, going around on social media of Afghan security forces barely able to do a basic goddamn jumping jack. Yeah, that was fucking ridiculous. So between from what I've seen, what I've researched, and what my buddy Vin told me, I'm feeling a lot better about the pullout. I was feeling discredited, defeated, my wish for a pullout feeling like it was foolishness. But with some added perspective, I felt a lot better about it pretty quick. Was the pullout badly mishandled? You bet your ass it was. And we got 1 or 2 scenarios. Scenario 1, Biden is retarded, and the botched pullout is a result of his retardation. Scenario 2, it was purposely botched so they would have an excuse to go back so they could discredit the idea of a pullout ever being attempted ever again. Either way, I'm fucking pissed. Scenario A, elder abuse, putting a guy who clearly needs to be in a nursing home in the office of president. Scenario B, they deliberately discredited the idea of pulling out in order to establish a superior peace in the Middle East by not having the U.S. perpetually involved there. Either way, I'm pissed. I have every right to be pissed. I've wanted peace in this goddamn world for so long, I can't even remember where it even started. Suffice to say, I've had enough. I have had enough. Nation building was bullshit. We all know the real reason why we were there. Nation building was just an excuse. As soon as we got our man, we got Al-Qaeda on the ropes, and we finally got rid of them, there was no reason to stay. There was absolutely no fucking reason to stay there at all. And yet we did. Why? It's pretty obvious why. They saw an opportunity. They saw an opportunity to acquire Afghani oil and Saudi Arabian oil. It was easier to obtain oil and to bring it home. It was all about the oil. It was all about resources, which is one of the biggest reasons why wars are fought anywhere in the world at any point in time. It is always about resources. That's what the Vikings were about. That's largely, surprisingly, that's actually largely what the Romans were frequently about before the Caesars wanted conquest. It was initially about resources. That's what many Greek city-states wanted, because they had to share national resources between city-states. Resources have always been a major issue in war. Resources and land. Now, suffice to say, the nation building is not a terrible idea. Helping someone to build for themselves a better country is a noble goal, and it is a noble idea. But it was clearly just being used as an excuse. If our point was to simply nation build in Afghanistan, then why was there so much activity outside of it? Why were we so busy in other nations and in the Green Zone and in other places? What was it? What were we even doing? And I'll tell you what we were doing. We were negotiating the major players to be in our favor perpetually. And let's just say that the nation building were more legitimate or succeeded. What would the nation we built be like? Would it be a U.S. puppet? Most likely. It probably would have been a puppet. It would have been a puppet state. A lot of people aren't going to want to hear this, but the truth is, the Afghanis are probably better off living under the Taliban. And here's just an example of why that would be. Now, you may be familiar with this, or you may be not. This is a practice called bacha bazi. It translates from the Afghani language to boy play. This is a disturbing and horrendous practice of adolescent male prostitution. And it is almost never consensual. I've done a fair amount of research on this, trying to hold my lunch down the entire time looking it up. Needless to say, I learned about it so you don't have to. In bacha bazi, they start often around 11 to 12 years of age, sometimes as young as 9. They are taken from their mothers and fathers for a price. The people who own the boys, who buy the boys, they promise to pay their bills, take care of them, yada yada. They dress them up like women, like prostitutes. They teach them how to perform erotic dance. They navigate the world of erotic dance. And they gather together in large parties and watch the boys dance in a suggestive manner. It is extremely homoerotic and disturbing, to say the least. And frequently, the boys are forced into non-consensual sexual relationships with a man that they have managed to arouse. I managed to find a documentary in existence where the journalist had managed to pull aside one of the boys to talk to them, and he was barely holding himself together. You know, he wanted to break down and cry. He was about 14, tears running down his cheeks, talking about how he was taken to a hotel and had to take it through the back door from 5 different guys in a row without his consent, while being sent creepy love letters from many of the men who raped him. When the Taliban was in power, botchabazi was illegal on threat of pain of death. The United States removing Taliban from Afghanistan? Thanks to the U.S. interference, whole generations of boys were permanently scarred by this practice. And the U.S. government did not allow soldiers to interfere in these activities. Afghani higher-ups in their government were doing this. They found like a 12-year-old half naked tied to a guy's bed, and they weren't allowed to do anything about it. It got so bad one of our guys literally beat the shit out of the dude for raping the kid. And that's just one example of the things that happened in the Taliban's absence versus what it's like in their presence. If you had the choice of living in a nation where something like that was happening versus a little bit of Islamic conservatism, I think many would choose the Islamic conservatism. As much as it pains me to say so, I would rather live under the vaguest of oppressions of Islamic conservatism and Abrahamic traditions than to live in a nation where something like that is allowed to occur. There is such a thing as cultural relativism. You have to understand that many different tribes, many different peoples have their own way of life, and that to some extent you must respect them. Who are you to force your way of life on another man or another person? Let me tell you, there were many times in history where such things occurred, and it was never pretty. It always ended up in cultural genocide and sometimes even literal genocide. Forcing your culture on another person always leads to tragedy. Always. Think about the colonization of America. What do you think that the European colonists were doing? That's exactly what they were doing. It's the same damn thing. You're forcing your culture on another culture. You demand they conform, that they become like you, and if they don't, they die. What is so different between that and what the U.S. was doing in Afghanistan? There may have been fewer deaths and it may have been far less aggressive, but the basic principle was the exact same. Making Afghanistan like us. Colonialism. Neo-colonialism. Now, to close out this video, how could have the pullout have been better? Or better yet, what would I have done? I'll tell you what I would have done. First and foremost, I would have made certain that all equipment which could not have been taken with be destroyed. All of the vehicles would have a glass rock and water mixture poured into the engine that would destroy the engine and make it permanently useless, permanently stalled. Then I would remove all tires and destroy the tires, melt them down. And then I would load up all weapons into crates, and the crates loaded onto Blackhawks. Any military structures like buildings or houses that were used by the troops would essentially be disassembled. They would sort of like be disassemblable and portable. You could take them apart and carry them with you. That's how it should have been done. But you know how it was done instead, is that U.S. citizens left in Afghanistan were left there, equipment was left there, Blackhawks was left there, nothing was destroyed. The only thing they took with them was the troops and the number of transports needed to carry them. That was it. It was just the troops. Bring them home, they say. Yeah, that's all they brought home. They should have brought the gear too, but they didn't. They didn't. Because that would imply intelligence. And since when has the U.S. government had genuine intelligence in just about anything they do? Since when? So yeah, Afghanistan is better off under the Taliban. We may have fucked up but we may have well fucked up our exit. But now that we're out, it's best that we just stay out. It's not our fight. It's not our call. It's a piece of ancient wisdom. Mind your own damn business. Anyway. As far as my books, I am in between distributors right now. I'm probably looking at Amazon Kindle. My former distributor changed their website quite a bit significantly. I was not able to make further uploads. So I'll probably be going through Amazon instead, as much as I have a certain distaste for Jeff the Talosian Bezos. As per the joke on South Park. Anyway, tschüss. Peace.